Please hold on for a second since still somebody is joining this webinar. Okay. Hi, I'm Angela from DrayTek Technical Marketing. And okay, so this webinar will be started. And please be aware that this webinar will be recorded. And during the webinar, if you have any questions, you may use the chat. And I will answer the questions. Okay. So with the current effort to slow the spread of the COVID-19, the coronavirus, so now many businesses are looking at how they can operate by having employees working from home. So DrayTek provides a work from home solution with VPN and app QoS, and this will be the topic for today. Okay, so this is the outline. We'll start by understanding the work from home VPN scenario. Then we'll talk about how to improve the working experience for the business critical apps. Okay, so we'll talk about the VPN topology. Then we'll introduce the remote dial-in VPN and LAN-to-LAN VPN. Then we'll look at how to choose the most suitable routers for the task. And during the more VPN information part, we'll talk about the single arm VPN and the VPN metro service. Okay, so now we look at the types of the VPN tunnels. And there are two main types of VPN tunnels in the DrayTek routers. First, we can see the LAN-to-LAN VPN tunnel, which is used to connect two whole LANs to each other. So in this scenario, the branch office can share the internal resources in the headquarters through just one VPN tunnel. And the second type is the remote dial-in VPN. So in this scenario, employees that's working from home or on a business trip can dial the VPN through their smartphone, PC, or Mac and access the resources in the headquarters. The level of the security may be a concern as well, and it will determine your choice of VPN protocol to use. So here are some recommendations for different operating systems. So when you're working from home or on a business trip, then you have to dial the remote dial-in VPN. And the suggested built-in type VPN in a client's device is that for the Windows clients, we suggest that if they're dialing the VPN to the Linux model, the 2960 or 3900, then we suggest them to use the IKEv2 VPN. And if they're dialing to the DrayOS models, then we suggest to use the L2TP over IPsec. And most others will go for an IPsec variations. And for the security adversary, we advise that for the IPsec tunnel, we suggest them to use the AES SHA 256-bit security method, which will provide the highest security and best performance. Or alternatively, users may dial SSL VPN or OpenVPN with the download of Smart VPN clients. And if you want to connect between the headquarters and the branches, then that's the LAN-to-LAN VPN. So once you connect it to the headquarter network, you'll then be able to access anything that the headquarters is connected to as well. So in this scenario, we can see that the branch can also connect to the cloud server, since the headquarter has dialed a VPN to the cloud server. And for LAN-to-LAN VPN, the suggested protocol is also the IPsec tunnel with the AES SHA 256-bit security method. Okay, so we now look at how to choose the right routers for the business. So we have to consider two main factors to decide which will be the best suits your needs. So the first is the internet connection types, whether is used the DSL VPN router or the broadband VPN router. So here is a table for the DSL VPN routers. And the second factor is you have to decide what's the maximum concurrent VPN tunnels that you need. So here we have single WAN routers, the 2762 and 2765, and a dual WAN model, the 2862 and 2865. So we can see the new model here has a great improvement on the performance from 70 megabit per second to 200 megabit per second. And also on the dual WAN, the new model has an improvement on the IPsec and SSL VPN performance from 85 megabit per second to 300 megabit per second. And for the SSL VPN performance, it goes from 45 megabit per second to the maximum 130 megabit per second. Okay, so well, there's somebody said that they can see the presentation. Can everyone see the presentation? Okay, so I'll continue. Okay, so the next table, this table will show the number of supported VPN tunnels in the models that featuring one or more Ethernet WAN port. So we can see from here that we have single WAN, the 2133 series. And if you need the dual WAN model, we have 2926, 2952, and 2960. And for the multi-WAN, we have the 3220, 3900, and 3910. And we can see that the max concurrent VPN tunnels we support from 2 tunnels to 500 tunnels in the 3900 and 3910. And the IPsec VPN performance for 3910 comes to 3.3 gigs. And for the SSL VPN performance, the 3910 can go to 1.6 gigs bit per second. So here's the VPN router, and you can base on your needs to choose the right router for the business. Sometimes the customers will ask that they don't want to change the existing office network since maybe they have important company gateway in the company, or if you want to replace the company gateway with a bigger router is a tough job. So, well, that's not a problem. Actually, you just have to connect the bigger router in the company gateway's LAN side, and then just set up the single on VPN. Then that will works. The remote host can dial in a, a VPN to the bigger router and access the company resource. So for the details of how to set up the single on VPN, we have the guide in the knowledge base. So you can see, you can link to the knowledge base after the webinar to see the setup details. And another situation is you might find that some ISPs that they only assign private IP addresses, which are not suitable for VPN tunnels. So DrayTek supports a VPN matrix service. So all you have to do is register your VPN routers to the VPN matrix. Then the VPN matrix will help to exchange the connection information, including the external IP addresses and the port number. So that's step 2. And the step 3 is after the information is exchanged, then the VPN tunnel can be established successfully. So with VPN Matcher, you can set up the VPN tunnel in 3 steps quickly. Okay, so that's about the work from home VPN. So after setting up the work from home VPN, now we will discuss how to improve the experience for the business critical apps. So we'll talk about the bandwidth management can make the apps work smoothly, and we'll talk about how to set up the QoS topology and how QoS works is to flexibly allocate the bandwidth, and we will have a quick demo, and then we'll talk about the app QoS improvement, and then we'll talk about the routers that has support the improved app QoS. Okay, so when we talk about the bandwidth management can make the apps work smoothly, we'll said there are 2 types of bandwidth management, which is the first one is the bandwidth limit, and another one is the QoS. So the bandwidth management is to the bandwidth limit is to set up the limitation for overall bandwidth, and the QoS is to set up the predictable limitation for up to 4 customizable classes. And the latency for the bandwidth limit may vary from time to time, and it depends on the packet size, the type, like the UDP packets or TCP packets. And the latency for the QoS is controllable because you may define which class is more important, and the bandwidth will be given to the important class first. Okay, so we can see the pictures up right here. For the bandwidth limit, you will set up a maximum rate, and once the bandwidth exceed the maximum rate, the packet will be dropped. So so the advantage for this is that router doesn't have to inspect on every packet, so it will require lower router resources. However, the disadvantage is that maybe some important packets may be dropped. And for the QoS pictures here, we can see that when we set up a maximum rate, and once the bandwidth exceeded the maximum rate, the packet will be moved into the queue and lined up. And once there are available bandwidths, these packets in the queue will be moved out and use these bandwidths to process. So the advantage for this is that you can set up the priority for important traffic. So you can say what kind of packets should be moved out of the queue first, and what kind of packet should be moved out of the queue later. But the disadvantage is that router have to inspect on every packet to see if this packet is important or not. So it will require more router resources. And today we'll focus on the QoS part. So during the work from home topology, you can set up the QoS on both routers, the routers in the headquarters or the routers in the branch office, and this will both works. And we will have a quick demo later on, and you'll know how it works. Okay, so about the QoS topology, it is to flexibly do the bandwidth allocation for business critical apps. So the so-called flexible bandwidth allocation is that the routers will reserve the bandwidth for the business critical apps. And when these business critical apps are not using the bandwidth reserved, the bandwidth reserved can be used by other apps. And here we talk and the QoS will reserve a pair of 88 kilobit per second bandwidth, especially for the VoIP calls, since VoIP protocol always has the highest priority. And how do we detect the VoIP protocol? Is that the router will listening to the VoIP ports, and the default SIP UDP ports that listened by the router is the 5060. However, the 5060 is configurable. And other VoIP ports is the RTP port. And for the RTP port, it are auto-detected by the router. Okay, so how do we set up the QoS to do the flexible bandwidth allocation? It's quite easy, and you can do in 3 steps. So we'll talk about it. In the first steps, you just have to define your WAN bandwidth and operational direction. And for the DSL router, um, the WAN bandwidth will be automatically detected by the router, but that's just for the DSL model. So after we define the WAN bandwidth and the operational direction, the second step is to specify the business critical apps and their importance. So we can say that, like we say that VoIP is the most important, and we have 4 customized classes. So for the class 1, we can say that Skype is important because we have to use Skype to communicate or to have a phone call when we are working. And maybe YouTube and Facebook will be classified in a class 3 because they aren't so important during work. So how do we specify the business critical apps? There are 2 ways. One is the app QoS, and the second one is the QoS rules. So later we'll talk about what's the difference between the app QoS and the QoS rules. So for app QoS, DrayTek router supports 150 more than 150 popular apps. So you can set up, say, Skype is important and YouTube is not so important. You can set up the class rules like this. And the advantage for AppQoS is that you can easily set up the rules in few clicks. And we'll have a quick demo later on. And the disadvantage is that AppQoS rules is applied to all LAN clients. So you can't say that you just want to apply the app QoS to LAN 1 clients, but not LAN 2, because the rules is applied to all LAN clients. So if you want to flexibly set up the rules, you may use the second one, the QoS rules. So QoS rules can set up the class rules by service type or IP addresses or DSCP. So with IP addresses, you may set that maybe an important subnet, and you want to reserve more bandwidth for an important subnet. For example, in some company, they separate the subnet by department. So there might be some department they need to reserve more bandwidth, but some don't. So you can use the IP addresses to set up the class rules. Another situation is maybe you have an important server in your business, so you can use the IP address to set up the class rules with a specific IP address. So the advantage for QoS rules is that you can flexibly set up the source and the destinations to meet all kinds of scenarios. However, it is not so easy to set up this kind of rules if you don't have some basic computer networking know-how. So here's an example for bandwidth reserving with the app QoS. We can say that put Skype into class 1. So we will have a check here. We just click on Skype and then we select class 1. And that you can do with the app QoS. And here's another example for bandwidth reserving with the QoS rules. So you can see from this topology, if the headquarters has an important server here and the IP address is 192.168.100.100, and you can set up the local IP address here. You just say 192.168.100.100 in class 1. Then you reserve the bandwidth for this important server in the headquarters. Okay, so after the first step and the second step, the third step is we have to reserve the corresponding bandwidth ratio for the business critical apps. So we can see from this picture here, we can reserve 35% for class 1 and 30% for class 2 and 20% for class 3. So it's recommended to reserve bandwidth for high priority classes, and mind that the bandwidth can be used by other less priority classes when the bandwidth is available. So after a three-step setting, then the QoS start working, so we can verify the status by the status here, and the status will show like this. So now I will have a quick demo for you to see how the work from home VPN and the QoS works. Okay, so now here you can see at the there's a left-hand side 2862 routers that will act as a branch router, and in the right-hand side here has a 2926 router will act as a routers in the headquarters. So now both of them dial a VPN. And here's the details is that the routers in branch office, I've do settings is that I will route the traffic to the headquarter routers. Okay, so after the VPN is dialed up, we can go to the bandwidth management. So we go to the quality of service. And here's so we'll go through the first step. The first step is have to enable, and then we'll define the inbound and outbound bandwidth, and the operational direction, I will choose both for the both. And then I'll first save for this. And then the second step is that I have to specify what's important apps for me. So I'll go to the app QoS for both routers. Okay, so in the branch office, I said that the Facebook will go to traffic for Facebook will go to class 3, and traffic for Skype will go to class 2. That's all for the branch office router. I'll click on OK. And for the headquarter routers, I'll set that the traffic to Skype will be classified in class 1. And maybe Gmail for class 2, and Office 365 will go to class 1. And then click on OK to save. Okay, so that's step 2. We specify the important apps, and then we go back to the quality of service again. So the step 3 is that we reserve the bandwidth. So now I said that for class 1, for the router in the branch office, I reserve 35% of bandwidth for class 1 and 30% for class 2 and 25% for class 3. And in the headquarter routers, I reserve all 25% for each class. then we'll click on OK. Okay, so that's 3 steps and done. And then we can see on the status. So now I will make some traffic of YouTube. So just now in the branch office, I've set up the, let's go back again. I've set up the, here, the streaming apps is all in class 3. Okay, so we go back to the quality of service again, and then we see the status. Okay, so now we make some streaming traffic. And you'll see the class 3 bandwidth is running, is growing. And how do we know if the traffic in bandwidth in branch office has sent to the router in the headquarters? Is that we didn't set up the YouTube in the headquarters, so it will be classified in others class. So now the string makes the bar of class 3 grows, and in the headquarter routers, the bar of other class is growing. So that's how it works. So you may set up the QoS in both routers in the branch office and also in the headquarter office. Okay, so that's a quick demo. And now go back to the presentation. Okay, so actually app QoS dysfunctions has been supported already. However, recently we have do some improvement on this function. So before we support about 110 apps, but now we can support 150 more apps. And another improvement is that the popular apps can be inspected and classified into different classes. And what does that mean is before, for the basic app QoS, our router can't do the close inspection to differentiate the traffic from Skype, YouTube, BitTorrent, for example. So if you want to reserve the bandwidth for Skype, YouTube, and BitTorrent, and you want to move Skype into class 1, then YouTube and BitTorrent have to go to class 1 together. However, with the improved app QoS, we now can have a close inspection on the traffic for these popular apps. So you can say that for the Skype traffic, go to class 1, and Office 365 go to class 2, and for the YouTube and Facebook go to class 3, and the BitTorrent will be left in the others class. So that's improvement on the app QoS. So now we'll introduce what models of routers has the improved app QoS function. So for the dual DSL WAN, we have 2862, 2865, and for the broadband WAN router, we have 2926 and 2927. And here we have a value for if you enable the QoS function, the max NAT throughput will decrease a little bit. So the 2862 can come to 300 megabit per second, and 2926 can come to also 300 megabit per second. And for the 2865 and 2927, the statistics will be tested later on. And here has the firmware that supported the improved app QoS. So the 2862 and 2926 well supported from firmware 394, and 2865 and 2927 will support the improved app QoS since 4.2.0. Okay, so that's all for the work from home VPN solution with app QoS for today. Um, so and okay, so if you have any questions, you can type in the chat bar. Um, so here's Joe models. Ask that is it possible to limit the access to a single LAN IP from a device entering the LAN through a VPN? Well, that can be done by using the firewall, but not the app QoS. Okay, so if there's no other questions, then this will be end for the webinar. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye. Thanks everyone.